John, I made you a co-host as well in case my internet fritzes out here.
Okay, thank you. You're doing pretty good up there, though. Well, like you said earlier, we have kind of, oh, here comes Courtney. We don't have many folks so far.
It doesn't feel like 7, you know, it's still light out.
I'm trying to promote a few people here to panelists.
Oh, okay, that's the problem.
I'm not sure why they're not taking.
Oh,
but
here comes Annika.
Bernadette should be promoted.
Yep. So Lori, Bernadette and Annika will be able to show some slides.
They should be able to. We are live on home TV.
Oh, okay. Let me pull the meeting to order then. And first item on our agenda is the agenda, the approval of the agenda. I'd like to add, after the discussion of replacing Rose, election of a new vice chair. And so I'd like you all to kind of think about that, because when we get to that point of the agenda, I'd encourage somebody to nominate themselves or nominate somebody else. We do need a vice chair in case I can't make a meeting for whatever reason. So are there any other items that somebody would like to add to the agenda? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Okay, thank you, Kendra. Courtney, you second this. All in favor of the agenda? Raise your hands, please. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, moving on to the approval of the minutes. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If you have any, just kind of raise your hand. Yeah, Anna, go ahead.
Something minor, but in the commissioner application, the last sentence just trails off. Sarver suggested inviting her to.
Okay.
I presume that was to a future meeting.
Yeah, actually, my recollection was that she had expressed some interest in working in the tree area, and I had suggested she be invited to join the tree committee.
Okay.
That's Lori, can you?
Well, you were the suggester, so.
Yeah, that's my memory, what I remember at least, you know. But any other suggestions, corrections? Okay, with that minor correction, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last?
Apologies, but Tom Frazier also had some minor suggestions, which I will include as well. I didn't bring them with me.
Yeah, these are kind of more editorial changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, super. Okay, those can be incorporated too. So I believe Anna just made a motion to approve the minutes. Can I see a second? Okay, thank you, Courtney. All in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to public remarks. Is there anybody who would like to make public remarks?
And we'll point out that the people you have in the attendee of the Zoom meeting can use the raise hand feature, and we can give them the ability to speak. Alternatively, if you're watching from home TV, We can take telephone calls at 517-349-1232.
Thank you. And, I guess we don't have anybody who wants to speak right now, but we do have another opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comments. And so that brings us up to our new business. And our first item on the agenda is wetland preservation and stewardship discussion. And tonight, Bernadette and Annika are going to share some information that they've been kind of researching. So Kendra, did you have anything you wanted to say before Annika and Bernadette start?
I just wanted to thank, I think it's Audrey and Bernadette that are doing this. Am I correct about,
okay.
About that? So I just wanted to thank them for, working on this and here we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, Bernadette, Audrey, why don't one of you get started?
Okay, I'll get started. Okay, I'll let Audrey take it away.
Okay, so my name is Audrey Hirschert-Walton, and I'm going to be a senior at Oakland High School, and I'm joined by Bernadette, who's also going to be a senior.
So what are wetlands? So for our agenda today, we're going to be talking about what are wetlands, what do they do, specific Michigan wetland law, especially in the Meridian area, and also what you can do to help.
So what are wetlands and what do they do?
So a wetland is basically any place where water and land mix consistently enough to support organisms who live in between aquatic and terrestrial. There are three main types of wetlands: marshes or flooded grasslands, which are what you probably most see around here in Meridian, swamps, which are flooded woodlands, bogs, which is water bogged down with vegetation, and Michigan is home to all of these and more.
So why are wetlands so important? In Michigan, they're really important, especially because of our specific climate conditions. So for us, since we're around the Great Lakes, they're really great for reducing flooding and storing water. And when they store water, they become habitats for a lot of different kind of animals who are adapted to those conditions, specifically ones that actually eat mosquitoes. So they actually reduce mosquito populations in moderation because they provide habitats for the kinds of predators, like predators of mosquitoes. And then they also, when they are storing water, they're slowing it down and they're draining the pollutants and sediments out from the water, and they are providing a great ecosystem service of cleaning our water for us, which is a lot cheaper for us to depend on them. And then they also take in CO2. A lot of Michigan, especially in the Midwest, there's a peat which is created, which is basically like a lot of organic matter being stored under the surface of water, and that carbon isn't released into the atmosphere, and it's stored at the bottom of a wetland and just like under the surface where it can't be released. So it's a really like big carbon sink. And all of these combine to provide really great recreational opportunities for Michiganders, from hunting and just views, and like opportunities to look at native plants.
So in a 2005 report, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality estimated that before European settlement, there was about 10.7 million acres of wetland in Michigan, which is a lot. But since then, we have lost 4.2 million acres, mostly to farming and development. So 25% of Meridian Township is a wetland. So that's giving us the opportunity to really make an impact on our local ecosystems. However, in this like map next to this, you can kind of see Michigan wetland loss. And if you look down here in Ingham, if you can find it around where I'm circling my mouse, It's at a 61 to 80% wetland loss, which is not good at all. We definitely need to work on this so we don't turn red and we go more green.
So wetlands, as I said before, they're a really great way to store water. And now we are having more climate-related big storms that are happening more frequently, especially around the Great Lakes. And this past couple, well, just today it's been raining, but also like last weekend, where there are power outages and just a lot of water. There are a lot of like ramifications that come from intense flooding, where the water has nowhere to go because there are less wetlands. So when roads are flooded in downtown Okemos, people can't get to our businesses, and those businesses suffer from that loss of profit because people can't reach their businesses. And then also just like flooded basements, and there was actually last year in May of 2020, there was a dam failure in Midland, and that was actually if you look at the map, I'm not sure if my hand's going to be mirrored. For me, it looks like it. If you look at the map at the thumb of the mitten, was the really red wetland loss areas. That was actually where the flooding was, like a lot of that, just like the place where the flooding was so severe in Midland, it was a place where there were a lot of wetlands that had been lost, and they had put in a dam to kind of make up for that, and these man-made systems, but it failed, and it caused a lot of people to have their homes ruined, and it caused a lot of money and damages. And if we had more wetlands, then this wouldn't be as big of a problem because we wouldn't have to rely on these systems that are prone to failure, and it would just make everyday living easier when flooding does happen.
So without the protection of natural wetlands, the bigger storms we will expect in the future, and it will continue to flood the places we need to use. So it's kind of like a cycle that we really need to break. Yeah, so something can be done. Wetlands are known as nature's kidneys. So we really need to protect them because just like we need kidneys for our body to run, we also need them for nature with wetlands. So through the passage of wetland protection legislation in Michigan, the rate at which we are losing wetlands has decreased, but more work needs to be done. So some things we need to do are protect remaining wetlands. Naturally created ecosystems are more efficient, both economically and environmentally. We also need to support stressed wetlands with the maintenance of existing wetlands under pressure that can be done by ordinary citizens like everyone here. And restore wetlands as well, which is manufactured wetlands, although costly, will save more money through restored ecosystem services.
So for Meridian Township ordinances, some things that you can do in Meridian Township, the kind of the rules that we have in Meridian Township, there's a required 20-foot natural vegetation buffer around wetlands, and like maintaining that if you live near one, or if it's in your yard, making sure that you're not encroaching on it in any way. And in your garden and in like places around, I've been seeing more native plant gardens, which is really cool. But there's a lot of the native plants that are suited for our ecosystems have really deep roots, and they can help wetlands function, but also they like stop erosion and deep roots, always better. And also making sure for the 20-foot natural vegetation buffer, not to use chemical pesticides and limiting your use of chemical pesticides, and other like herbicides would definitely be good if you're trying to preserve the wetlands that we have. And then also, if you have to use herbicide, to remove invasive species that will take stress off of the native species that are around you. And there's a number that you can call. And there's another link for more ways you can help.
Yeah, so thank you. And yeah, that's the end of our presentation. We just wanted to share a bit about wetlands.
Hey, thank you very much. That was actually, that was, I guess, the first time I seen kind of a distinction between swamps and marshes, which I hadn't understood before. I wonder too, are there peat bogs in the township? Does anybody know whether there any exist here or? Courtney?
I don't believe, John, that we have any in the township, but the closest bog that I'm familiar with is Rose Lake, so it's still in Ingham County. But it's really cool if anybody gets a chance to go out there, but I'm not familiar with any in the township specifically.
Okay. Hey, thank you, because I'm somewhat familiar with Rose Lake, so I didn't realize that that was on, of course, there's lots of acres out there, so that's interesting. Okay, other questions for Bernadette or Audrey, or comments about the presentation? Kendra.
I just want to say fantastic job. Thanks for putting in the hard work. And I didn't know if Annika or Luca had any things they would like to add that was kind of missing at all. If not, that's okay. But I thought you both did a fantastic job sharing this information with the community and educating all of us on the wetlands. So thank you.
I guess, Luca, you've got a question or a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to have kind of like a collective question for everybody, but it's more of my question would be how do we balance natural population growth and our need for more residential, agricultural, and commercial area while also not only stopping the reduction of wetlands but also restoring them? Like, so how do we? Does anybody have any ideas on how we can continue to restore the wetlands and not only stop the reduction of them, but restore them while also being able to continue our natural population growth?
Very good question. Does anybody would like to comment on that? Audrey?
I think that as if I go around my neighborhood and I see like several places that like I live in a pretty kind of spread out suburb, like there's lots of space between my house and my neighbor's house. And like literally the space between my house and my neighbor's house gets really flooded. And when I was talking to Kendra, or when Bernadette and I were in a meeting with Kendra, she was talking about how like most of the places that she's gone through that have been developed and there are puddles, she's like, yeah, there was a wetland there before. And there are like little ponds around my neighborhood too. And I think we could definitely put more of a focus on like making mini, like kind of rain gardens, but like not, but the areas between developments can definitely be, I think there is plenty of space to be restored. And if I look at, there's actually like a place at Chippewa in the northwest corner of the Chippewa grounds that goes into a drain, and it's completely useless. It's just an open field. And I think there are lots of just completely useless open fields in Meridian Township that literally could be restored. And I don't think anybody would really notice. I mean, I would notice and be happy. But that's a very good question. But I think that there are opportunities right now to restore wetlands in just really expansive spaces. I think we could be more economical in where we put wide open spaces and where we can fit smaller wetlands.
That's a good thought, because I know in the past we've discussed the whole idea of maybe some of the natural preserves could be, kind of reverts to wetlands, because we got almost 1,000 acres of natural preserves, and some of them that could be done. That's would be kind of a natural way to kind of increase the amount of wetlands we have. Other comments or thoughts? Kendra?
Well, I would say, Luca, what a question. I think we could spend days or weeks discussing that topic. I don't know how to answer that easily. But you know, I think that's the whole point of reason why we're having this discussion here, right? So to understand how we can balance both, right? How can we balance both? How can we have population growth, but how can we also protect our ecosystem in the process? So, you know, is a 20-foot buffer around a wetland, is that good enough? Will that assist? And I think, you know, I went back to look at what we discussed last month, and I made a comment last month about it had been ridiculously dry. You know, so we hadn't been really noticing the wetlands, and then we got 5 inches of rain last week, right? And so we kind of noticed those areas where there's the flooding and all of that kind of stuff. And as Audrey said, some of those areas were likely former wetlands, but most certainly it would be helpful, but not all areas that were flooded, but certainly places that I drove around, I was like, yes, most certainly that probably was. And so how do we educate the community about ways that they, you know, can be protected against flooding and different kinds of things if they live on a property that maybe once was a wetland? Like, for example, I know people that live close by me that are having to run sump pumps all times of the year without the rain, right? Because those properties were developed on probably when they shouldn't have been. And then you have a rain like this and it's problematic. So I don't know if, I'm guessing there are folks on this committee or this commission that know a lot more about this stuff than I do, but I think this is why we're having this discussion, is trying to sort out how we can do both.
Certainly one thing that can always be done is, you know, what's kind of called infill development, right? Because if you think in terms of, there is kind of available land that has already been developed before and can be redeveloped, right? All we have to do is kind of drive around the township and we can see kind of empty lots or lots that have been developed that can be redeveloped for residential or commercial purposes. So, and I think, yeah, I mean, the township may have tools already to encourage that, but certainly that's one thing that immediately comes up is the idea that, oh, sure, we don't want to discourage new development, but there's a lot of opportunities kind of within the urban areas already, or suburban areas, where we can do that. So we don't necessarily have to kind of fill in wetlands in order to kind of have new housing or commercial buildings. Of course, the way things are going too, malls will be looking for new uses too, or you know, so there's a lot of constant changes with respect to building use and land use. But other thoughts about wetlands? Kendra.
Well, I noticed Anna had her hand up, so I want to go over to her, but I just want to say, John, I agree with you about that. I think the younger generation doesn't necessarily want as large of homes as some of us, you know, maybe have on this commission, or so I think those ways of thinking about using land differently might be helpful. And, you know, I'm not sure how that's been studied, but I just know from the younger folks that I work with that they don't want, you know, some of what we have. So I think those are worth consideration. And I'm going to throw it over to Anna.
Thank you, Kendra. Yes, I agree entirely. And was also thinking about population density. So not just the infill of spaces that aren't being used, but also, are there opportunities for greater population density within areas that are currently developed? And of course, there's environmental pros and cons to population density as well, but something to consider.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Bill?
Yeah, thanks. What an interesting discussion. So many thoughts come to mind. Let's see if I can organize them in my head. First, so the township's wetland protection ordinance is based on a policy of no net loss. So our official policy as a township is that we will not lose any more wetlands. And there is certainly work to be done ensuring that regulatory process meets its stated goal. And there are places where we're going to fall short, but for the most part, it feels like we're kind of doing a pretty good job of holding the line there. In terms of where opportunities for increasing the area of wetlands lie, John, you mentioned one of them. The township has some land that has been donated or purchased over time, land preservation, and some of that was drained as agricultural land, so it could be farmed back in the day. And it's possible that some of that could be, if you disable the drain tiles, you recreate those hydraulic conditions and you get back to towards a wetland. I noticed the presentation, which I think was excellent, focused pretty strongly on stormwater management, which is one of the most important things that wetlands do for us here. Not the only thing, but it's the most important thing, arguably. And our drain commissioner's office is charged with managing that stormwater. And if you were to go up to Lake Lansing and look at the Namoka Drain Project, you would see that they've converted some empty lots into some really big detention basins to try to catch some of that storm surge and try to hold it so it doesn't go down and flood the river. For the most part, those projects are driven by that stormwater management, and they don't necessarily aim for wetland mitigation, wetland creation, wetland restoration, but they could. And we got a whole lot of detention basins in this township that are candidates for wetland creation. And I had a third point, but it's escaped me in my rambling. If it comes back to me, I'll raise my hand. Thanks.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, go ahead, Courtney.
Thank you. Bill, very good ideas. I'll come back to that. I do want to thank Bernadette and Audrey. That was a fantastic presentation, so thank you. And Luca, exceptionally good question, especially as a board member making land use choices all day long. So that was a really good question. Bill, I really like the idea of looking at some of that previous ag land and like you said, there is drain tile. Is that something that, could be, beneficial and or be used or better used? And then to add to the drain project, so we have the Namoka drain going on, but also know that we've got several other drains, multiple, various, a lot of other drains in Meridian that were all put in at different times. So they don't really work as a system right now. And we are working with the drain commissioner to address some of those, specifically at the Grand River and Okemos and Grand River and Marsh intersections. So I think your idea of maybe looking at that from a bigger perspective, not just, draining, but also maybe looking at, how could we foster some wetland restoration there too. The one thing I think, and I've had these conversations with Kendra, is restoration and mitigation is really important. And we do have the no net loss in our ordinance. And I truly believe our ordinance is very strong. And I've talked to several people, it's stronger than most. So if, I look at, to me, maintaining existing wetlands are just as important too. So good question on how do we make sure that we can accommodate growth, but then protect the wetlands. So I think it's, a really important thing to think about on both sides, like our existing wetlands. And again, for a policy maker, making sure that we're keeping those, but then also in any opportune time where we could add to some of those wetlands would be fantastic. So yeah, I do want to just say that, we don't have great wetland maps. We certainly don't have anything specific to Meridian Township, but we do have wetland maps. And I know Commissioner Grisheshi and I are going to meet with Kara, who's our GIS specialist at the township, and maybe start having some of those conversations of whether or not, what do these different wetland maps mean? How old are they? Is there something that we could maybe do something more proactive in the community to start monitoring that? Because we just don't have that. And I know that's a large task. But working with our new community development director, Schmidt, and asking him what his thoughts were on the ordinance and maybe the enforcement of the ordinance. We've looked at potentially a larger wetland educational campaign. So it's something I kind of wanted to propose to the commission. I think, there's been lots of talk about this with Kendra and Tim and even Director Clark today. But I think there is, like Bernadette and Audrey, you did such a great job of explaining things. I just don't think there's a lot of that knowledge out there. So if we can figure out a way to get that knowledge you just gave to us, in addition to some of the other endeavors that have already happened, like the wetland brochure, we can get that out to folks. I think we can really help make a difference. If you don't know the importance of a wetland, or you don't know what you're doing could be detrimental, then how can you stop? So I feel like that's a very proactive approach that maybe the commission could foster, or I've contacted our communications director and asked her just for her input, like, what does she think? Is this even possible? So I do have a meeting coming up with her, and then I'll kind of loop everybody in just to see if everybody thinks that's an appropriate path to take.
Well, I think that's obviously very important, but also maybe very timely, because people are, I think, getting increasingly concerned about flooding, and certainly also about climate change. But, as was pointed out by Audrey and Bernadette, wetlands can help with both, obviously. And people probably don't appreciate how wetlands can help with flooding, because probably flooding is an issue for a whole bunch of the township residents. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. The third point was a wonky one about increasing density. And our current master plan in the township does call out 3 areas for potential intensity change, right? Downtown Okemos, Hazlitt, and Carriage Hills. And so that's another board policy, township policy, that tries to encourage that sort of infill higher density development in areas that don't flood, to try to preserve the remaining open agricultural open spaces in the township.
Yeah, let me ask all of you what kind of our priorities are. One priority is to, we've already had suggested language to change our ordinance to be consistent with state law, and we were some ordinances from other townships and local governments were shared with us, and so there may be additional changes that should be made. So that's a priority. Just revising the ordinance, making recommendations to the planning commission and the township board. Obviously, an educational campaign is kind of a top priority. And so, Courtney, your efforts are certainly really going to be really helpful. With respect to our own education, I think we've talked about having Tim Schmidt come and talk to us about other ordinances. So I think that's on Leroy's to-do list, is to see if we can get Tim to specifically come and kind of do a green theme briefing for us. We've also talked about the Drain Commission coming and talking to us, because we've got some ideas, right, on how we can work together. So, that's kind of a future meeting too, to have a presentation by somebody from the Drain Commission to give us some further kind of background. But other things that should be kind of considered high priorities by us as we kind of move ahead in this area.
One idea that comes to mind is the green infrastructure audit,
Right.
And quite related to this whole conversation. So we've got a nice template, and we could be one of the first communities in the region to sort of to move that forward, and with help from Cliff and Tri-County. So of course, wetlands are a key part of our green infrastructure. So.
And Leroy, could you give us, do you know what this, they were trying to do something at the regional level, which would be kind of a model, right, of how model language, or is that progressing? Do you know?
Yeah, there is a more official draft, sort of a template that Cliff prepared, and he was hoping that a planner, possibly possibly Tim Schmidt, would get on this regional committee to assist with tailoring it towards the community development planning perspective. But Tim, of course, was getting his feet wet, so to speak, or up to his nose in the swamp. As he emerges from the swamp, I think he'll have more time to participate in other regional initiatives. But anyway, it seems like it's ready to go. But obviously, rewriting your code of ordinances can be a challenge.
Yeah, actually, that makes me wonder too. I know the Planning Commission is always busy. Bill, do you have any sense for from a timing perspective, whether the planning department might be willing to kind of maybe focus in on this area anytime in the near future? I know that the form-based planning was a big deal. Maybe it still is.
Yeah, as much as we'd like to think that we crossed a big bridge when we adopted our master plan, that was actually several years ago, and it's the cycle is continuing. And one of the big pieces of that revision of our master plan is developing a future land use map, which is a big visionary thing that lays out what we would like to see at some future time. And all ordinance and regulation then flows from that vision of what we'd like to see. So to the degree that people have the opportunity to engage in the master plan process, that's one of those places where the sorts of ideas that are being included in the mixed use plan unit development ordinance revision and in form-based code can become more widespread throughout township land use regulation. So that's an even more wonky answer than the last one, but yes, there are periodic opportunities to revise our vision, and that's really the big ticket item in my mind.
Wow. Okay. Other thoughts about what our kind of high priorities to-do list for the Environmental Commission should be with respect to wetlands? Any further thoughts?
If I could throw something on the table, just a random thought. One of the most, I don't know, successful, attractive, noteworthy things that the Environmental Commission has been involved in the last year has been the tree planting effort. And it was a relatively small investment for the township board, but a huge investment, for the Environmental Commission to manage. And the amount of community energy that was mobilized around going out and digging holes in the ground, put trees in the ground, was really, really heartening, really, really encouraging. And if there's a way to shape future tree planting efforts or other efforts around the wetlands issues and around educational issues, that might really, I mean, the folks who come out to help plant trees are the ones who want to learn what they can do. That's my 2 cents.
No, that's a very good point. We have a community where we have community resources, people that can be really helpful, right? Any other further thoughts? Kendra?
I love that idea, Bill. And, as you look at the work that Emma Campbell is doing through the Conservation Corps, I mean, she's out there educating the community, not only on removing invasives, but also planting natives and part of the tree planting process. And actually in our Wednesday dialogue this morning too, we were talking about, considering tree plantings for the loss of loved ones and, different kinds of things. And we'll be talking about John Esser a little bit later, but, those are great ways to engage the community for a multitude of reasons that will help our ecosystem, but also if it's just, you know, about honoring a loved one or something, you know, how we can get that buy-in in so many ways. And then it's the visual, right? We can watch that tree grow and we have that investment. And I mean, it's just a fantastic idea.
Courtney.
I know I could go on and on about wetlands. We have lots of important things. I did read in the packet though, and I think this was Leroy's, his update, his director update, but there was also the idea of an adopt a wetland. And so that might be something that we could, you know, pursue or at least discuss maybe at a further time. But, you know, Audrey mentioned, you know, they've got wetlands in their neighborhood. I know, Kendra, you have wetlands in your neighborhood. Like maybe it could be a neighborhood-based type of effort where, again, Bill, like you said, the people that come out are the ones that are, you know, are excited about environmental issues. And so maybe that's, you know, maybe we could start small and move up. But I kind of thought that was a pretty cool idea as well.
Hey, Courtney, give me some ideas too. If you adopted a wetland, what does that mean in a kind of a concrete sense? What would you be doing? Maybe.
Well, so when I think of it as adopt a highway, right? So
Yeah. Right.
it would be making sure that the wetlands integrity is, you know, upheld. And that might be depending on the wetland. It might be, do we need to do some cleaning? Probably mostly education around that wetland. So what are those residences? Do they have questions, or do they want to be able to help? So I was kind of thinking like on more of a micro basis than a macro basis of like an educational campaign of, you know, maybe having, you know, a group that adopts that wetland and then makes you know, identifies what maybe the needs are for that wetland, but then of course the biggest thing being educating those adjacent homeowners and or, you know, across the road adjacent homeowners as well.
Yeah.
I haven't given it much thought, John, sorry.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's pretty, I think that kind of describes it pretty well. Yeah. Well, let's see. I guess we'll move on. And now, I guess Leroy's got on his to-do list to see if we can get Tim to join us at a future meeting, and also somebody from the Drain Commission. You know, because I guess we need to do that maybe before further discussions about ordinance language changes. And it sounds like, Courtney, your efforts will give us some direction with respect to a larger education campaign, talking to the communication staff. Okay, anything else before we kind of move on the agenda? Okay, thank you. And we're, well, unfortunately, we've had a Rose retired, and, you know, we do have 3 candidates for the vacancy. And, you know, we have a couple who were, I think, applied earlier, and now we have a new one, Jean McDonald. And Leroy, did you want to do anything, a summary of their backgrounds or anything? Did you have anything you wanted to say about the 3 candidates?
Not, I think their resumes speak for themselves. I got the impression talking with Jean that she's got some additional commitments at home. They had a death in the family, and she had also applied for several other commissions, so she may not be quite as, what's the word? She may not be a top candidate because of those other commitments, but I think she's definitely interested in being involved, maybe on the tree team or tree planting initiative or some of the other subcommittees. That doesn't mean that she couldn't be a great commissioner as well, but anyway, so it seems like there's a couple of top choices right now.
Yeah, I think both Ike and Valerie have very good backgrounds and have obviously a lot of interest in this. And, you know, we could proceed in a couple ways. One is that, like the previous time, we could discuss the candidates and Leroy could summarize our comments, which could be shared with the supervisor. Another option is, you know, if we wanted to, we could actually make a recommendation. Somebody could make a motion that we recommend, you know, Valerie or Ike. You know, that's a second kind of option for us to kind of pursue this. Does anybody have any thoughts about which of those approaches we should use? Courtney.
I have a lot to say tonight, don't I?
That's a good thing.
I have a question. So I reviewed all three of the applications and or the resumes. I'm wondering, how would you feel about having them come speak to us? Maybe, you know, and not necessarily in an interview per se, but maybe present their reasoning for wanting to be on the commission. That might help me particularly with, you know, the choice. Both Ike and Valerie have really great resumes, and I know I know Ike had previously, I'm not sure about Valerie, but had applied before. So there's clearly, you know, there's a excitement about wanting to be on the commission. So I'd like to hear from them. I don't know if that's even a possibility or if that's something anybody else would want to entertain.
Well, what does everybody think about that? Certainly, I don't see why we couldn't do that. Kendra.
Sure, I agree with that. I think that it's, you know, just to, yeah, here, I mean, they're both, I think it's very difficult to make a choice. Like I most certainly couldn't make a choice today because they're both involved in several different projects that we have going on, I believe. Yeah, and so I think that would be a good idea. So, and I think in general, we should have a consistent procedure for this. So so every time when someone applies, they know what that looks like. And, you know, and I thought that, isn't there some sort of consistent procedure somewhere in relationship to this kind of things?
Bill's got a funny look on his face. Yep.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to argue that we have any consistency in this regard whatsoever. I have always encouraged people who have expressed an interest in the Environmental Commission to come along and see what they're getting themselves into. And that's kind of tricky because sometimes we have very open-ended discussions like this about ideas and interests and goals and opportunities. And then sometimes we have public hearings where an applicant has filed an application to do some work in a wetland, and we're required to have a public hearing and make a recommendation either to Planning Commission or the Township Board. So those are very, very different sorts of things. Tonight's packet was relatively digestible, and I love the technology upgrade that we're getting. But when you get a wetland use permit application, especially in a PDF, yeah, it could be 30, 40, 50, 60 pages of material. And if that's built into your routine, you know, that's one thing. If it's not, suddenly Wednesday evening comes along. So I have always thought it's a good idea to encourage people to come along and if they choose to make public comment, great. If they choose to express why they're interested and what they think they can add, even better. But ultimately, that's the supervisor's decision to recommend those applicants to the board.
Yes. Well, Leroy, I think what I've heard so far is that, you know, our next step should be to invite Valerie and Ike and Jean too, I guess, if she's would want to pursue that to our next meeting.
Valerie is here as an attendee. I don't know if it's appropriate to, I mean, she does have the opportunity for public comment, but I think she'd probably welcome more time to prepare and
Right.
level playing field for everybody. But obviously you can say anything you want, Valerie.
Sure, but I think that's a good idea, you know, give her a little advance notice so she can kind of consider what she might want to say between now and the next meeting, and also invite Ike at the same time. And you know, I think basically it's like it's been posed, the question where they could certainly say whatever they would like, but we are kind of interested in, you know, why do they desire to be on the environmental commission, and their thoughts about environmental issues with the township. So,
Valerie is raising her hand right now.
okay,
I tried to promote her to a panelist earlier on, but I wasn't able to for some reason. But you should be able to talk, Valerie.
she's muted now. Valerie? We see your icon or whatever.
You have to, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I've prepared, so I can wait certainly another month. That would be great. Yeah, so I mean, for the level playing field's sake, I'd be glad to do that. So
Okay, super, thank you.
thank you.
Well, that leads us to, we do need to elect a vice chair. And so, you know, I'd like to encourage anybody to nominate themselves. That's legitimate, or nominate somebody else. Do I hear any nominations for the position of vice chair?
Can I ask what the commitments are as the vice chair?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. You know, if I can't make a meeting, then obviously the vice chair chairs the meeting. And, you know, sometimes the chairperson is asked to make reports to the township board or attend certain meetings. And if the chair is not able to do that, then, you know, we would logically look to the vice chair maybe to, you know, do that sort of function. I don't think it really, that doesn't happen very often though, but it primarily is you're kind of available to, you know, chair the meeting if the chair is not available. Bill, can you you've been on the commission a while. Oops, you're muted.
That's exactly right. And vice chair is the greatest job in the whole world. Everybody should do it. Yeah, the only other instance where the vice chair would typically spring into action is if the chair wanted to address a meeting not as chair, right? Rather than facilitating the discussion, either if there was a conflict of interest or if there was a personal opinion that the chair wants to express. In formal parliamentary procedure, the chair will surrender the gavel to the vice chair so that they can participate as a regular member of the commission. But if you wanted to destroy a wetland in your backyard, it would be inappropriate for you to chair the meeting where that recommendation was going to be made.
Good point. Excellent. Well, Anna, you kind of asked the question. Yeah, Kendra.
Oh, that was a good one, Bill. You know, I'm just wondering, I mean, Ned's not here tonight, right? You know, we're looking to get another member on here. Like, does this decision need to be made today? Like, you know, does it need to be made today? Like, you know, again, I think about like policy, procedure, consistency, like, you know, what does that look like? You know, so we're missing a few folks here. So I don't know, is it a good time to make that decision?
Well, no, that's a good point. You know, certainly there's no crisis. You know, we don't want to just completely forget about it, but there's no reason as far as I'm concerned why we can't postpone it. And one advantage with postponing it is gives everybody a chance to kind of think about it. And if anybody has further kind of thoughts or questions, feel free to kind of call me or email me. So yeah, why don't we do that? We'll because this just kind of came up out of the blue. Let's put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Kendra?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. I mean, I don't know if this is an agenda item, but to honor Rose for all the work that she's done for the Environmental Commission, I think that she's done a lot of work. That's that seen and unseen work that she's done, a lot of the behind the scenes work that some of us might not be aware of. As you know, a lot of us do some of that behind the scenes work that some others aren't aware of. And so I think sometime it would be helpful to honor her, right? Like, I know we have a resolution to honor John Esser, but, to honor Rose, she's really was spearheading, the tree team and, lots of other projects that I'm not even probably fully aware of all the work that she's done. And I'm not even sure how long she was on the commission, but she deserves recognition.
Absolutely. And I just kind of assumed that that's planned and would be on the agenda for the next meeting. A resolution kind of recognizing her many contributions. Bill?
Nope, that was it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I just wanted to, if it wasn't clear, Rose is still interested in staying on the tree team.
Oh, good. Good, excellent. Well, that moves us to the resolution honoring John Esser. And Leroy, do you want to give us just a little background?
This is something that came up at our previous meeting, and resolution is just a draft. So if you want to add anything or subtract anything from it, it's in your packet. We just need a sort of a motion to approve, I suppose, and discussion.
Andrew?
I move to approve. I mean, John was, I can't say that I've known him very long, but just in the time that I've been involved with the Environmental Commission and, before I was on the commission, but involved, in green dialogue and all that stuff, his jingles, I would say the majority of you know him better. There's so much commitment and kindness and, and I didn't even, I researched him a little bit. I didn't realize he had, I didn't remember that he had run for the Board of Trustees. So he was just really committed to the environment on so many different levels, into the township and the well-being. And, I know we had this resolution, but, this would be another, I thought, tree planting or something like that in addition might be helpful. So I'm sorry, long-winded as far as that goes, but I move to approve.
Bill?
Second the motion.
Any discussion about the motion? Okay, and I have to admit too, the contact I had with John during the green dialogues, it was always a kind of a great contributor and really added a lot to the discussion. So resolution is very appropriate. All in favor of approving the resolution? Okay, thank you. And that brings us up to, there's no old business. Let's see, chair's report. Let me just mention a couple things that came up in the green dialogue that I think it's kind of worth noting. One is that Valerie had talked about a listening session done by Eagle related to climate change. And so we discussed that this morning. And I guess it was 2 hours, and basically an opportunity for anybody in the state to kind of make comments. And so we were discussing the idea that maybe the township would like to do something like that, maybe related to climate change, maybe just environmental issues. So I wanted to kind of pass that along to everybody for something to kind of us to think about and maybe discuss in more detail at the next meeting. Obviously, it's another kind of job for the communications department and the staff, but I think it could be really valuable to have that kind of Zoom listening session. And the other thing we talked about was using, there's a Green Meridian Facebook group, and we talked about using that as a way to kind of get information out to residents. There's I think about 245 people that belong to the group. And I've noticed that postings there typically get 30, 60, 100 people kind of view them. So a few of us have been kind of asking questions and doing more postings because I think it might be a good way for, citizens to help each other and to kind of get their questions answered. One that we encouraged this morning was Cecilia Kramer. We used to work for the Drain Commission, so we talked to her about maybe she could join the Facebook group and then we could pose a question to her about flooding. Because she knows a lot about water, just to kind of get that kind of dialogue going within the township with the things that you can do on your own property. And of course, part of what could be discussed too is the role of wetlands. But so that's it for me. Leroy, staff report.
Most of this is in your packet, so I'm not going to repeat it all. If anyone has any questions, let me know. My technology is kind of limited right now. I'm in a laptop that a quarter of the screen doesn't work, and I do have an internet connection, but let's see.
Which corner of the screen doesn't work?
Upper left. I can still see you fine, Bill. There you go. I think, anybody have any questions about the update? That's great, Bill. Thank you for that. Appreciate your sense of humor. One thing that is an issue, I shared the results of the survey of whether you want to keep meeting on Zoom or whether you want to meet in person. There's a couple issues that come to mind related to that. One is what we might consider meeting, if we're allowed to continue meeting on Zoom, according to the Open Meetings Act. Maybe we could could meet more frequently on Zoom, but once a quarter or so we'd meet in person. The other, Courtney probably knows more about this than I do, but one other issue is that a lot of our agenda is not necessarily making policy change. So we may be required, there may be some exceptions if we keep major policy things off our agenda. I don't know, but it strikes me that there may be some legal way that we can continue to meet on Zoom. But does anybody want to add anything to that? It seems like there's a majority of you would like to continue meeting on Zoom for various reasons. Has anyone heard anything more? Go ahead, Courtney.
Lorraine, I have not heard so much at the township level, other than just like your survey, we were surveyed as a board on what our comfortability was, what our vaccination rates were. So I would expect, we chose to go back in person, but we still have some times where people have to be on, online. So I would expect that to transfer over to the commissions. And this is not an opinion of anybody else than myself, but I also work for the Department of Public, Health and Human Services. And even at the department, we're given the opportunity to have a choice. So I did like the fact that you offered a hybrid. So if somebody's not comfortable or might be immunocompromised or whatever reason, doesn't matter what it is, but not comfortable meeting in person, I know that that Director Gibbs is working on making sure that there is that opportunity at the board to still have a Zoom presence. So I can certainly look into that more. I know they're working on it currently, but my thought, and I would support whatever's most comfortable for everybody, and that might be a hybrid situation. I prefer to be around people and enjoy people's energy, but I know that that's not always both healthy nor the choice of other people. So I can look into a little bit more.
That would be very helpful. Yeah, I don't even know if Leroy, I think your survey has been very helpful, and but we may want to, before we make a final decision, get a little more guidance from the township, just in case that might influence what we decide. So that kind of leads me, though, to liaison reports. And Courtney, do you have anything else you want to share from the board?
A few things. So we did have a special board meeting that was really updates from our directors, our M team. So there was 3 things that I think are of interest to this commission, but we talked about it listed as sustainability plan, but truly the conversation was respect to one of our goals, which is moving towards more solar. So those solar projects are underway, one of them being on specifically now being on our one of our fire stations, and I always forget which one, and I need to be better familiar with those, but that is underway and should be, you know, finished up here soon. The other one is moving forward on our diversity, equity, inclusion plan, which leads into our environmental justice. So we are working to move that forward. The next step there is working with staff to get some training, some intense training, which should be fun and or maybe uncomfortable in a great way. And then looking at our policies and procedures at the township level and making sure that our policies and procedures are conducive with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've made a couple progress steps. For example, the ban the box. We banned the box of having to say on your application whether or not you've been convicted of a criminal activity. Not to say that we wouldn't still do a criminal background check depending on which position you're applying for and how that might be applicable, but it's just one less thing to put a barrier in front of folks that could be really great candidates and that might, you know, have some past concerns that shouldn't be an issue in certain cases. The other one that I think would be applicable would be our MSU to Lake Lansing pathway and the pathway master plan. And anybody that knows Luann, they're working diligently and have made great progress on incorporating a contiguous pathway between Lake Lansing, MSU, and Meridian Township. So we have now 25 miles of pathways and or trails, and they're working so hard to get them all contiguous, which would make it even more if you could do loops. So I thought that was fantastic too. Let's see. I did talk about the educational campaign. I did have a meeting with Director Schmidt about the Wetland Ordinance. And unfortunately, Laura, I couldn't pull up the proposed changes to the ordinance, but we did have a discussion about the ordinance, and the ordinance is very strong in comparison to other ordinances. And we're actually one of a handful of municipalities that actually are more strict than the state law. So I think that is a great start. Fantastic. Didn't get to see the proposed changes, but looking at more forward, how can we ensure that that ordinance is in compliance and is, you know, an enforcement or an education campaign? How do we do that? So had those initial conversations. And then I mentioned too that Commissioner Grisheshi's and I are gonna meet with Kara and kind of discuss those wetland maps too. So maybe look at where we're at, where do we want to be, how can we get there, and very preliminary, but that's my report.
Well, thank you. That's all. Sounds like good progress. Boy, that's great. Let's see, Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, I think that's Ned, which he's not on tonight. And the energy team, I'll just mention that, you know, at our last meeting, we did talk about the solar home tour. And, you know, last year we had done a virtual solar home tour. The energy team was talking about doing this would be in October, again, doing a virtual solar home tour, but kind of expanding it to maybe other sustainability sites, rain gardens or whatever. So that's being discussed. The other thing that was discussed was the idea that you know, it'd be possible with homeowners' permissions, you know, to basically encourage people to go on site to kind of check out like a solar system or a rain garden. I visualize that as, you know, somebody's at the sidewalk kind of gawking at your house for a little while, you know, and I don't think that would be a problem for people, but we would obviously, before we would encourage that, we would check with any homeowner or individual responsible for some property. So that was kind of discussed, and we still got we have basically our core videos that we can build on, because we have, I think, 11 videos that we used last year for a virtual solar home tour. And let's see, environmental justice. Anything new on that? Okay, I don't see any. Okay. Green, oh, Kendra?
Oh, I was just gonna say a few things about that. I think that, you know, in discussing, I think it'd be helpful for us to define what environmental justice is. We've already been discussing it already. You know, we're talking about things related to the wetlands. We're talking about equity. We're talking about DEI. Like, you know, we're talking about all these different things, and those are all part of environmental justice. So I think it'd be helpful to define that. And I know we're talking about, you know, what's success look like? You know, how do we do this listening, you know, activity that we're in the, you know, Valerie's idea to kind of, you know, get, you know, incorporate that. And then what are the issues in the community, and what ways are, you know, how can people voices be heard, you know, how, and build that trust back. And I think that's what environmental justice is really all about. The state of Michigan conference was all about rebuilding trust. And I think that's what I think we're all interested in doing. So.
Yeah, and you know, if you have a definition that is maybe used by other organizations, or, you know, you may want to bring it to the next meeting to share, just so we can, you know, kind of hear what has been used by other folks and kind of discuss its applicability to us. So that could be helpful. Green team, Leroy, do you have anything that you want to add about the green team?
I just quickly that we're thinking about a medicine collection, and one of our former volunteers, pharmacist actually, was on earlier, and I didn't get to ask her if she wanted to help staff that July 17th at the Meridian Market. So that's, we're looking for volunteers to staff a table, information table, and also collect medicines. And the police department is assisting with that, as well as the Ingham County Health Department. We are open to ideas for an event in August, and then we'll have our regular large electronics collection in September on the 18th. Tom just joined us and expressed his apologies for not being able to make it earlier. He had a conflict. Go ahead, Tom, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I really don't, Leroy. I think you've covered it. The next big one is coming up on the 17th with a medicine recycling, and then our big event in September. So nothing further to add. And I'm actually a passenger in the car, so I'll try to participate as I can here.
Thank you, Tom. Glad you could join us. Let's see, Land Preservation Advisory Board, Kendra.
Okay, so I cut short discussing land preservation last month because you know, our wetland discussion had run long, and you know, lots of our land preserves are full of wetlands, and our wetland code is involved with the land preserve. So, so on May 12th, we met at the Davis Foster Land Preserve to talk about a possible lookout deck location, and that decision has yet to be made. On June 9th, we met at the South Lake Lansing Preserve to discuss issues there, and that's where some environmental justice issues are an issue, and so we're having there's some issues with the resident encroachment and how to handle those issues, and so we're having to go back to the basics and talk about what our land preserve policy and procedures are, along with, you know, wetland policy and procedures. So that's where we're at that. And I don't know if everyone was able to see Emma's latest Meridian Conservation Corps spring summer newsletter. But of course, Emma always does a fantastic job, and it's chock full of information. So there's the summer stewardship series on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and Ecology Tuesdays, and which someone I'm very close to attended that yesterday, and I was hoping I could attend it, but I couldn't. And I think a couple folks on here attended it. So, you know, Emma's fantastic at educating all of us on, you know, just the precious ecosystem that we have here. It's just in awe of her skills. And then, so, you know, again, if you're not part of the Meridian Conservation Corps, I would encourage you to join and learn some fun stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Kendra. That leaves us Planning Commission. Bill?
Yeah, the Planning Commission last met on June 14th. There was a series of rezoning requests that were considered at that meeting. Probably of most interest to this group was a special use permit for landscape and grading improvements in the floodplain on Nakoma Drive. That's in the Indian Lake subdivision. And basically what it amounts to is a homeowner requesting permission to move soil from their front yard up closer to the house, because that raises the contour elevation around the house and means that the house is no longer considered in the floodplain. And I think it's worth kind of thinking through how members of our community are responding to the potential for future floods, and how federal and state regulations around buildings in floodplains and the sorts of insurance that are available and subsidized are working. And so I bring that one to the attention of the Environmental Commission, just to note that the issue of how we deal with future flooding is not only really complicated scientifically, right, but it's pretty darn complicated administratively as well. And it's not easy to get your head around it. And it has huge implications for people who are or are not in a floodplain, do or do not qualify for federally subsidized insurance. So something to keep an eye on. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Let's see, we're up to State of Michigan. Tom, have you heard any rumblings that should be passed on?
No, not too much. I think they're currently in a 2-week break. Nothing really specific as far as environmental issues to report, but they did finish the education budget before the July 4th break. They still do have the general budget to do, which includes funding for local units of government. A couple of some attempts at local authority to preempt local authority. So far, those have been fought off, if you will. Both the one in particular, the rental issue that I've mentioned in the past, there has been attempts to take that legislation up on the House floor the last 2 weeks, but because of all the calls from local officials, they haven't taken a vote on that. So that's good news from a local government perspective. You know, individuals may disagree with that, but I kind of still wear my local government hat. So, but that's about it as far as I'm aware.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
Bill, do you have anything related to Transportation Commission?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. And that leads us to the tree team. Rose is kind of leading the tree team, right? Is anybody kind of is anybody here kind of active on the tree team as a report to kind of pass on, or? Okay.
Nothing much, other than that there might be a couple of levels of tree teams. One involving people like Luann and Derek and some of the department heads that work with trees, and then a smaller team, depending on the activity or, you know, if a project related to trees. But I think she may have some more to add, but Kendra, go ahead if you have anything to add.
All I had to add, I don't have anything to add as far as being part of it, but I think in thinking about how we, you know, share tasks and all of that kind of stuff on the commission is worth a chat. So I know there's a, you know, we're talking about, there's a list, you know, of some responsibilities that some folks have on there. I think there's some responsibilities that are missing on there that we can update another time, but I think that's worth a discussion probably at another time about who's going to do what and fill the role that Rose did, because she did a lot of things that I think that, you know, that went unnoticed sometimes, maybe noticed and unnoticed, you know, so.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Boy, I guess we have another opportunity for public remarks. Any further thoughts from any of the commissioners? Or Leroy, do you have any parting thoughts?
I appreciated your suggestion, Kendra, for an orientation, and John and I provided that briefly for Bernadette and Annika today, and hopefully it was well received. But just reiterating that, encouraging them to pipe in and help direct our initiative here and ask questions as we go along. But thank you for suggesting that. I think it was your idea, and hopefully they found it helpful.
Yeah, Leroy and I plan to continue to do that whenever we have a new commissioner, just a very informal kind of Zoom or phone call where you just kind of basically talk about some basics and give the new person an opportunity to ask questions. So it seems like, I think it was a good approach. Anything else before we adjourn for the evening?
Chair
Okay.
Sarver. It's Stephen here. I'll take my public comment just to give you guys a quick update on where we're at with the continuation of a hybrid Zoom meeting. It's our understanding that once all of our executive orders and state of emergencies and everything cancel, which we believe we're in a state where that's happening very quickly here, we are no longer able to conduct the virtual meetings with anyone who's been appointed or elected to office, appointed by the township board, elected by the electorate of Meridian Charter Township. They have to attend in person according to the Opens Meeting Act. We are prepared and preparing to be able to do a hybrid presentation to bridge kind of as we move back to this thing. But for right now, our focus is on getting everybody back to in-person meetings with capabilities to do hybrid as it's allowed. We're expecting probably the legislature to give us some options to do some things as we move forward and as other COVID things happen over the remainder of the year. If you have any questions or concerns, I'd be happy to address them. Otherwise, I'll let you continue on with your meeting.
Well, that was very helpful clarification, you know, because it seems like it's a work in progress. And I remember reading about state legislation that allowed local governments to go virtual. But am I right in assuming that there's no reason why we can't for the next meeting do a virtual meeting? Does anybody, is that of course, something might be decided between now and then, but.
So from a technical perspective, I believe we would want the supervisor to declare a state of emergency. And I think that he can do that for 29 days at a time. The last one that he did was in March, so that's probably technically expired. We may not be compliant with Open Meetings Act tonight by doing this virtually, but that's something that we didn't realize until it was actually happening during our discussion.
Well, it's Leroy's fault, so that, okay, well, we may be having an in-person meeting next time. But we'll wait for further guidance from staff and go with the flow. Okay.
We do have the main fire station community room is technically reserved, if that's okay with people. Just in case, keep that on the agenda, or if you want to suggest another location outdoors or wherever, try and make a decision. Anyway, go ahead.
there is some reason we wouldn't use the township hall, Leroy?
I think it's under repairs maybe, but maybe Stephen knows.
The repairs are expected to be finished this week, so we expect to do the planning commission in person there Monday night. Everything's expected to be buttoned up and put back together for that meeting.
It looks like we could meet at the township hall then. I would assume that's helpful for home TV folks, but well, we'll wait for further guidance from staff. Okay, any further comments before we adjourn? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Thank you, Bill. A second? Okay, got a number of seconds. We'll take Kendra's, and all in favor say aye. Hey, thank you, everybody, and particularly thanks to Bernadette and Audrey for such a great presentation. I think we all learned something new. Take care.